Shalom. First, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Bashem Rakah Kodash, the manners to the apostles of greatness, stone, and shalom to the Hakim, pushing the straight in sincerity and in truth. Alright, this is Kazak from GMS Jamaica. Alright, and just come. Just basically gonna do just a biblical commentary on this video. Alright, it's an old video from TED. It's a TED Ed video. Alright, TED Ed video. I'm guessing it's narrated by Anthony Hazard. Alright, and it's about the the Atlantic slave trade. What few textbooks told you. And it's a short video. And hopefully we can get into it in under 30 to 45 minutes. So yeah, just gonna start it.
Slavery, the treatment of human beings as property, deprived of personal rights, has occurred in many forms throughout the world.
Alright, so slavery is not something new. You know what I mean? Slavery has been around from ever since. You know what I mean? Slavery will always exist. The thing is, when people hear the term slavery, right, to the modern, based on them think of the modern idea of slavery, which basically what our people went through, during the Atlantic slave trade. You know what I mean? But with slavery, right, there's a humane way and there's an inhumane way of it, right? But what them do is them separate the two, or if I say them consider slavery as the chattel slavery, what we went through, during that slave trade. But the word servant is actually the same thing as slavery, right? Servant, service, servitude, it's basically the same thing, you see me? But to majority of people, it is like a softer version. You don't think that graphic and horrific, those graphic and horrific images when you hear the word servant or servitude, right? That's why you can have things like civil servant. You get what I'm saying? So, which the word servant or slave, it literally just means to serve somebody. You know what I mean? Or the job description of a servant or a slave is basically to serve someone. You get what I'm saying? But I'm gonna show you from the scriptures, that there really isn't much difference between the two words, right? Because even if you do a biblical search, you're literally gonna find the word slave only 2 times. You get what I say? Only twice. Once in Jeremiah, alright, and once in Revelation, which the one in Revelation, the slaves, but are the same thing. You get me? So but when you do a search for the word servant, you find that word more than once, like the hundreds of times in the scriptures. You see me? And but there are certain precepts that describe the type of service that we went through in the Atlantic slave trade. See? So that's why I'm saying servant and slave practically the same. Just the same word, but with different meaning. Not meaning, but a different look at each word, for lack of a better word. See? For lack of a better term, I should have said. So I give the first example, right? I'll just give the first example, and then we'll go into the rest of the video. Make the rest of the video play. Alright, so we're gonna go. Oh no, not 7. Exodus 1 and verse 7. Alright, so this is Exodus 1. We're going to start at verse 7. Alright, and this basically a deal with when Israel first went into slavery in Egypt. Alright, it says, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Alright, so just a little backstory. This is when the land, there was famine in the land. Egypt was good, right? Things that are going for down at Egypt. Joseph was sold into Egypt by his brothers them, right? The other sons of Jacob, seen. So he was doing well over in Egypt, right? The famine, Joseph and his brothers met up. Basically, they invited the rest of, Jacob and the rest of, people them for coming to Egypt. I believe about 70 of them went into Egypt, or 70 plus. And so after a while, as it I say, the land filled with Israelites. Them start breed up, them start, grow, right? So Israel is a strong people. Verse 8, it says, now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Right? And there's something, I'm going to highlight something else as well. Because what we need to understand is that at that point, everybody looked the same on the outside. To us, in our modern from our modern perspective, or through our modern eyes, would I see the Egyptians and the Israelites as the same people, because everybody was dark skinned back then, but each one knew their own people, right? Everybody had distinct cultures, everybody had distinct a distinct look, the way them talk, the way them carry themselves, their mannerisms, right? So it was easy for them to tell each other apart, and this is alright, so this is hold on. Okay, here we go. So this is Exodus 11 and verse 7. It says, but against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that ye may know how that the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. Alright, so there's a difference between the Egyptians and Israelites. Alright, so these men, as easy as it is to look upon an Asian person, right, and a so-called European person, and tell that there's a difference, even though they both have a lighter complexion. There are certain features where you can use to tell, and it's the same thing between Asians. To us, all Asians look alike, but to them, they can tell who is who or who is from where, right, based on them dialect, them language, right, certain features as well. You see me? So just wanted to add that. So now we could go back to verse 8, Exodus chapter 1. It says, now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramesses. Right, those are the two treasure cities. You know, it said, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Alright, and the children, Salakia, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. Alright, and this is to serve with rigor. Right, so there we have the word serve. So I could check this and see. Right, so here we have the word serve, which basically go back to servant, and it says it's from the Hebrew word ibad. Alright, from the Hebrew word ibad, and it says to work, serve, to labor. Right, to work for another, serve another by labor, to serve as subjects. Right, so a man might read this definition and say, oh, just a normal man with a regular 9 to 5. Alright, see, but it go more if you say how to serve with rigor. Alright, and we all know what the word rigor mean, but just go in it anyways. And it is from the Hebrew word parak. See, and it says harshness, severity, cruelty. Right, and that's exactly what we went through during the time of the Atlantic slave trade. Seen? During the Atlantic and after the Atlantic slave trade. Seen? Because after a while, man never necessarily need for buy slaves anymore. Seen? Because them could have breed up slaves. You see me? And them did a trade slaves inland. Right? As in plantation owners are sell slaves to other plantation owners. Right, so even after the ship them stop carry cargo, scene, you still did have the the trade that take place between right. So so severity and cruelty, as I say, same thing I will go through. Alright, so I'll go back to this.
One institution stands out for both its global scale and its lasting legacy: the Atlantic slave trade, occurring from the late 15th to the mid-19th century and spanning 3 continents, forcibly brought more than 10 million Africans to the Americas. The impact it would leave affected not only these slaves and their descendants, continents.
Right, so you have the triangle trade, right, which basically so you have the triangle trade, which will basically say the labor coming from Africa, so-called Africa, over to the Americas, right, and then the product from the Americas, the cotton, the sugar, etc., from the Americas back to Europe, right? So that's basically the triangle trade.
Forcibly brought more than 10 million Africans to the Americas. The impact it would leave affected.
Right, and the payments, right, from, I believe, from Europe to Africa, right, which would be like the guns and the spices and the herbs and rum and all kind of something, you see me, from Europe to Africa, where them basically use that for buy the slave them and so on.
Not only these slaves and their descendants, but the economies and histories of large parts of the world. There had been centuries of contact between Europe and Africa via the Mediterranean, but the Atlantic slave trade began in the late 1400s with Portuguese colonies in West Africa and Spanish settlement of the Americas shortly after. The crops grown in the new colonies, sugarcane, tobacco, and cotton, were labor-intensive, and there were not enough settlers or indentured servants to cultivate all the new land.
Right, so settlers, as in the 14th century with such man Christopher Columbus, were so-called discover the Americas, you know what I mean? Them had settlements, right, or colonies seeing where people from Europe would go to these countries for basically work, start a better life. Just like how you have Jamaicans who left Jamaica because foreign go look at work or whatever. You see me? Even out here in Jamaica, still you have certain people who descend from Germans, right? I watch a small documentary or a small video on YouTube once that showed certain German Jamaicans or certain Jamaicans who originate their foreparents originated from Germany. Zine. So those would have been the either the settlers or the indentured servants. Right, the indentured servants would basically man where a serve out a sentence basically. You see me? So you commit a crime, you work for a certain amount of years without pay. Seeing you get food and place for sleep and clothes, right? But you don't really get paid. Seeing so after you serve out your sentence now, seeing you get freed, and these are one of the reasons why the Atlantic slave trade actually picked up, because I was reading that in the South, I believe in the South, right, the indentured servants them were actually living out them sentence. You see me? Then they live out them sentence. So after them go some booms and them live out them, work out the amount of years that them supposed to work, them at the end supposed to get like land and a start, which for the most part that's the humane part of slavery, right? The humane part of being a servant. You see me? You work for a certain number of years, and that's actually in the scriptures. I'm gonna get that after this, right? You work for a number of years. After you finish your course, you get a start basically. Seeing, but this was proven to be unprofitable for the merchant them, right, or for the farm owners. You see me? It was proven to be unprofitable because them are not only them are lose servants, them also have to give away, right? Them have to give away land as well. You see me? And it even less profitable than if the indentured servants them even dead out. You see me? Not only you lose labor, but you have to give away as well. But yeah, continue.
American natives were enslaved, but many died from new diseases, while others effectively resisted. And so,
right, so them so-called the Americas discovered where the northern tribes already lived. Seeing them come over here, enslave them, introduce new diseases, right, to the Native American people. So most of them dead out, as him say, right. So this also play a part in the them coming back now to Africa to get slaves. See.
to meet the massive
And for edification's sake, you know what I mean, we're gonna touch upon the point of the how we actually get to Africa in the first place. Because as we say, we are the children of Israel, and if you check the map, which part the slaves them get taken from, that's not where Israel is. You see me? Alright, the portion of the continent where people get taken from, that's not where Israel is. The land of Israel, I should say. You see me? So we're gonna get that in another video, in another lesson. As we say, we just want to run off this, right, and get some points outside.
demand for labor, the Europeans looked to Africa. African slavery had existed for centuries in various forms. Some slaves were indentured servants, with a limited term and the chance to buy one's freedom. Others were more like European serfs. In some societies, slaves could be part of a master's family, own land, and even rise to positions of power.
Right. So that's why I say you have a humane way and an inhumane form of slavery. Is it me? It's all bad. You get what I say? But when it comes to chattel slavery, right? That is where the that is where the inhumane treatment comes in. See? No rest. You have to work no matter what conditions you are working at, no matter what the weather is. See? You're just out there and you have to just work. Right? But by right, as a matter of fact, I get that, as I said, I get that too. Now the scripture. See, as you have a form of servitude where you yourself can even become a servant, right? You can become a servant, you work for a number of years, and then you get land and animals as a start. See, so you can go out there and build your own wealth, build your own empire, right? You go say boom, you work for a rich master, a rich lord, right? He give everything what you need, right? Take care of for the number of years, amount what they agreed upon amount of years, you see me? And then you get a start at the end. What is there again? Exodus 21. Alright, so these are Exodus 21 and 1. It says, verse 2. If thou buy an Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If in shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master have given him a wife, and she have borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. And if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him unto the judges. He shall also bring him to the door, or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. Right, there we go. See, so you can actually choose to stay with your master, right? Now, and I'm sure there's I remember where to find the precept where it actually goes into you getting a certain possession when you leave. Seeing probably good. Give me a second, I'll see if we can find it. If we can't find it, we'll just go into it in another lesson. Okay, alright, so for the interest of time, we'll just go into it in a different lesson. So we'll continue.
But when white captains came offering manufactured goods, weapons, and rum for slaves, African kings and merchants had little reason to hesitate. They viewed the people they sold not as fellow Africans, but criminals, debtors, or prisoners of war.
Right, so the term when we use this as when we say not as fellow Africans, it kind of go off in a way, because really and truly not everyone on the continent of Africa are the same. You see me? There's diverse, there are different countries in Africa. There's, as a matter of fact, that land mass was called the land of Canaan. You see me? And in the land of Canaan, you had different civilizations, different kingdoms, different countries. You see me? You have the Philistines, the Egyptians, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Hagarenes, Moabites. Right? There were different civilizations in the landmass. You get what I say? And even though, for the most part, everybody was dark skinned, everybody had different cultures. Everybody had their own way of life. There were different cultures, different settings. So everybody knew who their people were. You see me? So it's not just where them always I say, oh, a black people sell black people in a slavery. That really not have no form of significance behind that saying. You see me I say? Because the black people them where sell the black people them know who them are sell into slavery. And for add to that, him say some of them were actually like prisoners of war, most of them were like prisoners of war and so on. You see me? So it's not just one set of people them are captured and are sell into slavery. You see me?
Rival tribes. By selling them, kings enriched their own realms and strengthened them against neighboring enemies. African kingdoms prospered from the slave trade, but meeting the Europeans' massive demand created intense competition. Slavery replaced other criminal sentences, and capturing slaves became a motivation for war rather than its result. To defend themselves from slave raids, neighboring kingdoms needed European firearms, which they also bought with slaves. The slave trade had become an arms race, altering societies and economies across the continent. As for the slaves themselves, they faced unimaginable brutality. After being marched to slave forts on the coast, shaved to prevent lice, and branded, they were loaded onto ships bound for the Americas. About 20% of them would never see land again. Most captains of the day were tight packers, cramming as many men as possible below deck. While starvation caused many to die of disease, and others were thrown overboard for being sick or as discipline, the captains ensured their profits by cutting off slaves' ears as proof of purchase. Some captives took matters into their own hands. Many inland Africans had never seen whites before and thought them to be cannibals, constantly taking people away and returning for more. Afraid of being eaten, or just to avoid further suffering, they committed suicide or starved themselves, believing that in death their souls would return home.
Alright, so going back to read the last precept, is me dealing with the word serve or servant again. See, so this is Deuteronomy 28 and 48 says, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron about thy neck until he have destroyed thee. See. And that's a perfect description of what we went through in the transatlantic slave trade. Alright, verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Alright, now as we're going on before, the first time we're going to slavery in Egypt, you see me, was in the literal land of Egypt, where, as I explained before, is that the rest of the children of Israel were actually invited into Egypt by Joseph. You see me? So basically what them walk going to Egypt from with them there. But this it's at this time we're going to Egypt again by ships. Right now, if you look up the word Egypt, if you look up come up. Right, so if you look up the word Egypt, right, it basically means, it comes from the Hebrew word matazarium, right, matazarium, which basically means double straits, seen, and the word straight basically just mean position of difficulty, right? Yeah, right. So the word straight mean position of difficulty, right? So double straights, you know what I mean? So we get brought into a double straight or a position of difficulty, or the word rigor when we explain before, when we read the definition for before. See, so we're gonna go back in that, but this time we are go by ships. By the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Alright, so there was nobody there for buy we, for make we free. Right, we couldn't even buy ourselves for make ourselves free. You see me? And that went on for years, for centuries basically, you know, until this day basically, because we're still somewhat in a form of slavery. It's just that everybody now upon the earth is a servant, right? Because in order to live, in order to survive, you have to do some form of service. That's what you go, that's how you go school for, right? For learn how to be a servant, to build the society. Seeing, again, me actually watch or listen a documentary recently, where I tell you how the school system came about in America. You see me? And you know, again, we can go into that in our next lesson. But for now, we actually out of time. So I want to say Kala Lemla, Yahweh Hashem Shai, Hashem Kodash. Hopefully this lesson was edifying. Alright, until the next one. Shalom.